For decades, there's been this one solid gold rule in parenting. Sugar makes kids hyper, right? It's the reason for all the chaos after a birthday party. But what if that's not really what's going on? Today, we're going to unpack what the science actually says, and you'll see why the real story about sugar is something we should all be paying way more attention to.
Oh, yeah, you've been there. We've all been there. The party's over, the cake's been eaten, and your sweet, calm kid is now ricocheting off the furniture. And what's the first thing we all think? It was the sugar. It's almost a reflex for parents, for grandparents, for everyone.
And look, this isn't just some casual observation. It's treated like a fundamental law of parenting. It literally dictates party planning, snack choices, and how we explain that inevitable meltdown after a big celebration. This idea is so deeply woven into our culture, it just feels like a straight-up fact. Okay, but what if I told you that this so-called fact has been put under the microscope again and again for more than 40 years, and the results are probably not what you'd expect? What if that connection we're all so certain about isn't really there? And this is where it gets really, really important, because this isn't just about busting some old wives' tale. While we've all been laser-focused on the wild behavior we can see, we might have been completely missing the real long-term impact sugar has deep inside a child's developing brain. The truth is so much bigger than just a tantrum. All right, so let's jump right into the evidence. What actually happens when scientists test this whole sugar high idea in a lab? Well, this is pretty much the final word. This is a huge meta-analysis. That's where they combine the results from lots of really good studies, and it came to a super clear conclusion. They couldn't find any proof of the sugar rush. Study after study, the link just wasn't there. And these studies were seriously clever. They used what's called the double-blind method. It's the gold standard for a reason. It means nobody knew who got the real sugar and who got the placebo. Not the kids, not the parents, not even the researchers. This is so important because it gets rid of our expectations. If you expect your kid to get hyper, you're going to see it. This method removes that bias completely. And we're not just talking about 1 or 2 experiments here. That big JAMA review we mentioned, it looked at 16 of them. And time after time, when kids got sugar, but their parents didn't know about it, that crazy hyper behavior everyone expected, it just never showed up. Okay, so you're probably thinking, wait a minute. If the science says it's not the sugar, then what on earth is happening at these birthday parties? I mean, the chaos is real, right? So what's actually causing it? Well, it turns out the answer isn't really about what our kids are eating, but where they're eating it. We've been blaming the wrong thing. We see 2 things happen together, treats and wild behavior, and we assume one causes the other. But the reality is way more about the situation itself. So let's break it down. The real culprits? First, the environment. Parties and holidays are exciting. They're loud, they're off schedule, they're super stimulating. That alone is a recipe for a kid to act a little bonkers. Then you've got that parental expectancy we just talked about. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And sure, a crash in blood sugar can definitely make a kid irritable or cranky, but that's a whole different thing than true clinical hyperactivity. And this is where we need to make a really important pivot. Just because sugar doesn't cause hyperactivity, well, it doesn't get a free pass. Not even close. So let's shift away from the myth and talk about the proven physical damage. This is the biggest takeaway of this whole explainer. For years, by focusing all our energy on the wrong problem, behavior, we've kind of overlooked the very real, scientifically proven dangers that too much sugar poses to our kids' health in the long run. And the list of those proven risks? Man, it's pretty scary. We're talking about a direct link to a higher risk of obesity, elevated blood pressure, and type 2 diabetes. It sets kids up for heart disease risk factors later in life and, of course, the one we all know about, tooth decay. These aren't theories. These are medical facts. But the physical stuff is only half the battle. Some of the most groundbreaking and, frankly, alarming research is now showing us what a high-sugar diet physically does to the brain itself, especially when it's still growing. Now, this is fascinating. It turns out that adolescence is this incredibly important time for brain development, which also makes it incredibly vulnerable. And studies on animals are showing that lots of sugar during this time specifically affects the hippocampus. That's the brain's headquarters for memory and learning. And this right here shows just how permanent some of this can be. In these studies, they gave rats sugary drinks all through their adolescence. Then they took the sugar away completely. But months later, well into their adulthood, those rats still had major memory problems. It seems like the early sugar intake programmed their brains in a way that couldn't be easily fixed just by eating better later on. So here's where things got a little more detailed, because it turns out the way kids get their sugar really matters. While studies say that total sugar doesn't cause general hyperactivity, there's a strong connection when it comes to sugar-sweetened drinks. And with energy drinks, whoa, the link is even stronger. We're talking a 66% higher chance of reported hyperactivity. This chart from a Yale study just nails the point. See that first bar, overall sugar intake, doesn't really move the needle. But that second bar? For every single sugary drink a middle schooler had per day, the risk of reporting symptoms of hyperactivity and inattention jumped by 14%. It seems to be that super fast high-dose hit of liquid sugar that's the real problem. Okay, so hearing all of that, you're probably asking, so what are we supposed to do? Well, the good news is we have a really clear, simple toolkit to work with, straight from major health organizations. This is the number. If you remember nothing else, remember this: 6 teaspoons. That's about 25 grams. It's the absolute daily maximum of added sugars that the American Heart Association recommends for kids and teens. And for the little ones, under 2, the rule is even simpler: 0. None. But here's the reality check. The average kid in America is getting about 18 teaspoons of added sugar every single day. That's triple the recommended limit. This chart just shows how huge that gap is, and it's why this is such a massive health issue. But listen, cutting back doesn't have to be some impossible task. You can start with 3 really simple steps. 1. Get to know the added sugars line on nutrition labels. 2. Make sugary drinks a once-in-a-while thing, not an everyday thing. Think 1 small serving a week, not a day. And 3, when you want something sweet, reach for whole fruit instead of processed stuff. So look, we've moved way beyond the myth of the sugar rush. The question isn't, will this make my kid hyper for an hour anymore? The real question, knowing what we know now, is what kind of lasting imprint is this leaving on their brain and their body? When you think about it that way, it changes the whole conversation, doesn't it?